Have you ever stopped to think why use 20,000? Do they seem so different from any other number that comes before them? It's not just money in the account. It's not just a higher balance. For many people, this amount marks something deeper, almost invisible, a psychological line that, when crossed, silently changes how the mind perceives its own financial life. Have you ever experienced this? For years, the struggle is clear. Paying bills, breathing easier at the end of the month, getting out of a iced out, tight spot. Every dollar counts. Every decision is difficult. But then, little by little, something happens. The balance starts to grow. The debts stop suffocating. The constant fear diminishes. And when you realize it, you've arrived. $20,000. It doesn't seem like a huge number, but internally, it feels different. It's the first moment when many people think, now my life is improving. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. This amount of money usually brings enormous mental relief. It's as if the pressure of the difficult years finally loosens. The mind relaxes, the body relaxes. The feeling is that, finally, there is a safety margin. For many, it's the first time that money ceases to be just about survival and begins to represent possibility. Possibility of choice, of comfort, of small luxuries, of saying, now I deserve it. And that is profoundly human, but that's precisely where the invisible danger lies. Because, as 20,000 they don't just function as a financial milestone, they act as a psychological trigger. Without realizing it, the mind begins to tell a new story. A story of stability. A story of, now everything is under control. A story that often doesn't correspond to reality. Have you noticed how, at this point, decisions begin to change? The problem is not getting to 20,000. The problem is what changes in your mind when you get there. Your relationship with risk changes. Your relationship with spending changes. Your relationship with financial discipline begins to loosen, almost imperceptibly. That constant vigilance that existed when money was scarce begins to disappear. And in its place emerges something more dangerous. The false impression of stability. It is at this moment that many people begin to confuse progress with definitive security. Money is still scarce for big mistakes, but the mind starts to act as if the game has already been won. Small concessions seem harmless. Expenses that were previously unthinkable become rationalized. After all, I'm better off now, right? What you will discover throughout this video is how this psychological milestone can silently transform into a point of stagnation, or even regression, because there's a pattern that repeats itself more often than people like to admit. A silent, emotional, almost automatic pattern. And understanding this pattern is what separates those who use the 20,000 like a bridge to something bigger. For those who get it stuck right there, without understanding why. Let's move forward and unravel what really happens inside your mind when that number appears. And that's why this subject needs to be spoken aloud, because many people cross this milestone alone, without realizing what's happening inside. Each person feels this moment differently, some with relief, others with euphoria, others with a confidence they've never experienced before. If this resonated with you, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. Perhaps you've already experienced this moment of, who's 20,000? Perhaps it's still on its way. Perhaps you've already felt that silent shift in your mind and never stopped to name it. Your experience might help someone who is going through this right now and doesn't even realize it. And if at any point in this video you thought, that's me, or that's happened to me before, consider liking this content. It seems simple, but this gesture shows that this type of conversation needs to continue. That's how the video reaches more people who are also at this delicate point in their financial journey, trying to understand why something that seemed like a victory started to cause confusion. If you feel that this channel talks about money in a more honest, more human way, it's also worth subscribing. It's not just about numbers, it's about mindset, behavior, and choices that almost no one explains. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and spread this type of message further. Every comment, every like, every subscription helps keep this conversation alive. A conversation that many people avoid, but which changes everything when it's understood. And now that you've realized that, 20,000, they are not just a value, but a psychological dividing line. The next step is to understand exactly what pitfalls begin to emerge from there, and why they catch even intelligent, disciplined, and well-intentioned people. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because it is precisely after this milestone that the story begins to change silently. When financial relief arrives, it doesn't come as extreme euphoria or a feeling of wealth. It arrives as an absence of fear. And this, in practice, changes everything. The mind stops operating in survival mode and starts functioning in rest mode. The vigilance that was once constant begins to decrease. That almost automatic attention to every expense, to every decision, gradually dissolves. Without warning, the sense of urgency also disappears. Not because the problems have vanished completely, but because they seem more distant. The account is in the black, the balance isn't alarming, and this creates the impression that there's plenty of time to adjust anything later. Decisions, which were once conscious and calculated, are now made almost on autopilot. It's not carelessness, it's mental comfort. And that's exactly where the hidden truth of this moment lies. People don't feel rich, they feel less threatened. And that feeling is powerful. When danger seems distant, the mind changes its criteria. What was once evaluated with caution is now seen as acceptable. Small recurring expenses begin to appear, almost always justified as something normal. Subscriptions, services, small improvements in daily life. Nothing that seems serious. Nothing that triggers an immediate alarm. On the contrary, everything seems to be part of this new phase of the journey. Comforts enter as silent rewards. A little more convenience here, a treat there. Financial commitments that are just a little bigger begin to seem reasonable. After all, now there's room, now there's leeway. But this leeway isn't real stability. It's merely the momentary absence of pressure. And when the mind confuses these two things, decisions become guided more by feeling than by strategy. This is how the impact happens. Not with one big, visible, dramatic mistake, but with a sequence of small, repeated, almost invisible choices. Each one seems deserved. Each one seems harmless in isolation. And that's why almost no one notices the pattern forming. No one goes bankrupt because of one big mistake. People go bankrupt because of several small mistakes that seem deserved. This phrase sums up more than it appears at first glance. At this point in the journey, the transformation doesn't happen in the bank balance, but in the mindset. It's behind the scenes of daily decisions that the course begins to change. And understanding this process is what separates those who use this moment as a foundation for growth from those who remain trapped in a false sense of progress, without knowing exactly why. Because when relief turns into carelessness, the danger is no longer announced. It simply takes hold. If this makes sense to you, leave a comment below. That makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this is where many people get lost without realizing it. Money doesn't disappear all at once. There isn't one big mistake, one catastrophic decision, one dramatic moment that explains everything. What happens is more subtle and, therefore, more dangerous. The money simply stops growing. The balance remains the same, sometimes even grows a little, but the feeling of progress disappears. And this confuses the mind. At this point in the journey, the decisions all begin to seem normal. Nothing sounds irresponsible. On the contrary, many choices come with a sense of maturity. The cost of living rises slowly, almost imperceptibly. An adjustment here, another there, always with a good justification. Nothing exaggerated, nothing out of the ordinary, except that the norm is changing, and almost no one notices it while it's happening. Fixed expenses begin to accumulate. Commitments that seemed small when they were made add up and create a rigid structure. And fixed expenses have a silent characteristic. They are easy to accept, but difficult to cut. Once they become routine, they are treated as part of life, not as choices. It is behind the scenes of these decisions that progress begins to be drained. The most curious thing is that, externally, everything seems fine. There is no crisis. There is no immediate hardship. Income continues to come in, but internally, something has changed. The money that previously created a profit margin now only sustains the new level of spending. Progress becomes maintenance. The feeling of growth becomes static stability. And the mind, instead of finding this strange, adapts. Herein lies a hidden truth that is almost never clearly stated. The problem is not spending. Spending is part of life, of comfort, of the human experience. The problem is spending without realizing that the behavior has changed. When decisions cease to be conscious and become automatic, the impact doesn't appear in the short term, but takes its toll over time. This is how impoverishment happens silently, not due to a lack of income, but due to a change in mindset. The money keeps coming in, but it loses its capacity to generate transformation. It ceases to be a tool for advancement and becomes merely a means of sustenance. And this creates a stagnation that is difficult to identify because it doesn't hurt immediately. Many people look at their own situation and think they need to earn more, when in reality they need to better understand their own decisions. Because the financial journey isn't just about numbers, it's about behavior. It's about patterns that form silently. And while these patterns remain unseen, progress continues to be slowly eroded, almost like a form of education. If this resonates with you, comment below. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there's a mental shift here that almost no one notices while it's happening. When these 20,000 days things appear, the feeling of control is real. The balance isn't alarming. The accounts are in order. Life seems predictable, and the mind naturally interprets this as security. But this is one of the most dangerous confusions in the entire financial journey. Stability and security are not the same thing. Although they may seem identical when viewed from the outside. Stability is when nothing is falling apart. Security is when you are prepared for what hasn't happened yet. And the 20,000, they don't guarantee financial freedom. They don't create real protection against unforeseen events, and much less do they ensure consistent growth. They only create the feeling that the ground has stopped shaking. But the ground is still fragile. It has only become silent. It is at this point that something subtle begins to happen behind the scenes. Many people stop learning. Curiosity diminishes. The search for understanding gives way to repetition. After all, if everything is working, why question? Why review decisions? Why analyze habits more deeply? The mind enters maintenance mode, not expansion mode, and this has a direct impact on how money is handled. When you believe you've reached a safe place, you let your guard down. Decisions stop being revisited. Expenses stop being questioned. Habits that arose out of convenience become seen as permanent. And the problem isn't comfort itself, but the lack of reflection. Because the world doesn't pause just because your financial life seems stable. Unexpected events continue to occur. The market changes. Income fluctuates. The cost of living rises. And when these movements affect someone who has confused stability with security, the impact is much greater. Not because the person was irresponsible, but because they were mentally unprepared. The transformation that should happen at this stage is not external, it's internal. It's a change of mindset. There's a hidden truth here that lends authority to this conversation. Stability isn't security. It's simply the point at which mistakes become more costly. When you earn, little mistakes are limited by the budget itself. When you reach that intermediate level, mistakes gain space, scale, and more sophisticated justifications. And that's what makes this point so crucial in the journey. Those who understand this early on use this moment as a foundation for growth. Those who don't understand remain trapped in a comfort zone that seems safe but isn't. And recognizing this difference completely changes how you view your decisions, your habits, and the next step in this journey. If this made sense to you, leave a comment below. That makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this is where everything is decided, even if almost no one realizes it at the moment they are experiencing it. There's 20,000. These aren't just an intermediate number on the financial journey. They function as a silent crossroads. For some people, this value transforms into a solid foundation, a conscious stepping stone from which better, more strategic, and more mature decisions begin to be built. For others, the exact same value becomes an invisible ceiling, comfortable enough not to hurt, dangerous enough to trap them for years. The difference between a foundation and a trap isn't the money itself. It's the awareness with which it's treated. When someone understands that this milestone is still fragile, that it requires attention, learning, and constant adjustments, money starts working in favor of the journey. It becomes a tool for growth, not emotional anesthesia. But when this amount is interpreted as "I've arrived," the mindset changes. And it's this change that defines the direction. There's a subtle transformation that needs to happen at this point. Discipline ceases to be merely financial and becomes emotional. Because now it's affordable. It's possible to take on bigger commitments. It's possible to accept small mistakes. It's possible to normalize decisions that were previously unthinkable. And that's exactly where the risk lies. When the mind starts justifying bad choices simply because they fit the budget, progress ceases to be a priority and becomes optional. The hidden truth is that many mistakes don't seem like mistakes while the money is still coming in. They seem like comfort, deserving, reward. But little by little, these decisions shape a pattern that doesn't lead to immediate collapse, but to prolonged stagnation. Years go by, the rent even increases a little, but the feeling is of always being in the same place. Not for lack of ability, but for lack of conscious review. The ability to not normalize mistakes is what separates those who grow from those who remain stuck. It's realizing that just because something is affordable doesn't mean it's healthy. It's understanding that discipline isn't punishment, it's protection. And that financial awareness isn't living in fear, it's living with clarity. When these pieces fit together, the 20,000, they cease to be a limit and become a starting point. Most people never realize when they cross that line. And when they do, they're already trapped. Trapped in habits, in commitments, in choices that seem too normal to question. That's why this reflection matters so much, because seeing this moment while it's still happening completely changes the impact it will have on the future. If this reflection resonated with you on any level, leave a comment below. That makes sense to me. If you've made it this far, it's because this conversation touched on some real point in your journey. And that's exactly why it's worth continuing this journey together. If this type of reflection helps you see money with more clarity, more awareness, and less illusion, subscribing to the channel is a simple way to ensure that this content continues to appear for you, always delving a little deeper into these truths that almost no one talks about. If you'd like, you can also leave a comment saying that you've made it to the end. You could write something like, "This message was for me," or "I'm with you until the end." This isn't just a sign for me. It's a way to mark this moment for yourself, to acknowledge that something here made sense. And if at any point you felt understood, feel free to leave a like. Not as a favor, but as a natural gesture of the connection we built throughout the video. This helps this type of conversation reach more people who are also at this silent point in their journey. There's a video over here that perfectly complements this topic. Click on it and continue watching it with me.